You're looking at a $5.99 jar of Jif. The label says natural, the ingredient list says peanuts. But ingredient number two, right there in small print, is fully hydrogenated rapeseed and soybean oil, a solid industrial fat added to one of the simplest foods on earth. And the reason it's in there has nothing to do with flavor, nothing to do with nutrition, and everything to do with making sure you never think about making this yourself. Stay with me because in the next few minutes, I'm going to show you exactly how to make real peanut butter. One ingredient, about 5 minutes, under 40 cents a jar. And once you understand what's actually sitting in the jar you've been buying, you won't go back. But first, you need to understand how this happened because it didn't happen by accident. Real peanut butter, peanuts ground up, nothing else separates. The oil floats to the top. You've probably seen it in the all-natural versions at Whole Foods or the health food aisle. There's a half inch of peanut oil sitting on top and a dense paste underneath. Most people see that and assume the product is broken. That is exactly what the industry trained you to think. That separation is not a defect. That is the product working correctly. Peanuts are roughly 50% fat by weight, and that fat is liquid at room temperature. When you grind peanuts, the oil releases. It's supposed to. The separation is actually the sign that nothing has been added to glue it in place. In the 1950s, Jif and Skippy figured out that the average American consumer would not stir their peanut butter. Studies confirmed it. People didn't want to deal with the oil layer. They wanted something that looked uniform from the first spoonful to the last. So both companies added a hydrogenated fat, a solid fat manufactured by forcing hydrogen atoms into liquid vegetable oil under pressure, to lock the oil in suspension permanently. That solved the stirring problem, but it introduced something else. Partially hydrogenated oils were eventually linked so conclusively to cardiovascular disease that the FDA ordered them removed from the food supply in 2015. It took decades of lobbying and litigation to get that done. And when it finally happened, Jif and Skippy didn't remove the additive. They switched from partially hydrogenated to fully hydrogenated. Same family of industrial fats, different processing step, still sitting in your jar, still preventing separation, still buried in small print where almost nobody reads it. Here's the part most people miss. That solid fat doesn't just hold the texture together, it physically replaces peanut oil in the jar. And peanut oil happens to be the most nutritionally valuable part of the peanut. Monounsaturated fat, the same kind found in olive oil, linked to reduced inflammation and better cardiovascular markers. Every time a company adds industrial fat to keep a jar shelf stable for 18 months, that's the fat being diluted out. You're paying a premium for a product that's had its best ingredient partially displaced by a cheaper substitute. And it's been this way since before most of us were born. A jar of real, one-ingredient peanut butter has a shelf life of maybe 3 months refrigerated and needs a 10-second stir when you open it. Neither of those things is compatible with a product designed to sit on a Walmart shelf for a year and a half looking perfect. The additive isn't there for you. It's there for the supply chain. So let's make the real thing. Here's what you need. One ingredient, dry roasted peanuts. Brand barely matters. Planters, great value, whatever's cheapest per pound. A 1-pound bag runs about $2.50, and it makes the same volume as a standard 16-ounce jar of Jif. You're replacing a $5.99 jar with about $2 of raw ingredient, and you'll have enough left over for most of a second batch. Add plain table salt, just a pinch. That's the entire ingredient list. One step makes a real difference. Roast your peanuts again, even if they're already labeled dry roasted. I know it sounds unnecessary, but it's 4 minutes in the oven, and it changes the final flavor in a way that's genuinely hard to go back from. Spread the peanuts in a single layer on a baking sheet. Oven at 350 degrees Fahrenheit, 12 minutes. Pull them when they've just turned a slightly deeper brown and the kitchen smells like a ballpark. Let them cool a full 5 minutes before touching them. Hot peanuts create steam in a blender, and steam changes the texture you're going for. Now blend. Pour the cooled peanuts into any standard blender or food processor. A Ninja, a Vitamix, a $30 Hamilton Beach, doesn't matter. Run it on high. For the first 30 seconds, nothing seems to happen. The peanuts just bounce around. Keep going. Around the 1-minute mark, they break down into a coarse meal. At 2 minutes, the meal starts clumping. By 3 minutes, the oil fully releases and the whole mass transforms into a smooth paste. That moment, crumble to cream in about 10 seconds, is the fat finally doing what it's supposed to do. Let it run a full 4 minutes total. Add your pinch of salt, blend another 30 seconds, and that's it. That's peanut butter. Pour it into a clean glass jar. It'll look almost like Jif, just slightly more amber, slightly more alive. Refrigerate it. It lasts 2 to 3 months with no change in flavor or texture, and the oil won't separate the way it does at room temperature because the cold slows that process down. You can freeze it too, and it thaws right back to the same consistency. Here's what surprises most people the first time they taste it. It doesn't just match Jif, it tastes noticeably better. Same reason single origin olive oil beats generic olive oil. When the ingredient list is one item long, the flavor of that ingredient is all there is. No added sugar, and Jif does have sugar, it's ingredient number 3. No molasses, no mono and diglycerides, just roasted peanut, which turns out to be more complex than anything from a commercial jar. If your kids push back the first week, give it time or give them the chocolate version. For chocolate peanut butter, after blending to a smooth paste, add 2 tablespoons of unsweetened cocoa powder and 1 tablespoon of honey or maple syrup. Then blend another 30 seconds. Done. No palm oil, no high fructose corn syrup. Nutella runs $4.99 for 13 ounces with palm oil as its first ingredient. More palm oil by volume than hazelnuts. Your version costs about 60 cents for the same amount with actual peanuts in first place. One more variation. Run the peanuts 6 minutes instead of 4 and stir in a tablespoon of melted coconut oil. The texture turns noticeably smoother, closer to a $12 specialty nut butter. You're making that same product for about 55 cents. One honest limitation worth naming. Homemade peanut butter won't match the 18-month shelf stability of a commercial jar because it doesn't contain the preservative fat that provides that stability. Refrigerated, you get 2 to 3 months. Left out, maybe 2 to 3 weeks before the natural oils start to oxidize and the flavor turns. That's not a safety issue. Oxidized peanut oil isn't dangerous, it just tastes off. The fix is simple. Smaller batches, made more often, kept in the fridge. 5 minutes every few months instead of $5 every few weeks. And if anyone in your house has a peanut allergy, this exact method works with any nut or seed. Sunflower seeds, almonds, cashews, pumpkin seeds, same process, same timeline. Sunflower seed butter made this way runs about 30 cents a jar and is about the cleanest allergen-safe nut butter substitute out there, since every commercial version adds sugar and palm oil for the same reasons Jif does. Here's what stays with me about all this. Peanut butter was invented in the 1890s as a health food, a protein source for people who couldn't chew meat, prescribed by doctors. One ingredient, that was the entire point. It took the food industry about 50 years to look at that simple product and figure out how to make it cheaper, more shelf-stable, more visually consistent, and more dependent on a supply chain a home kitchen couldn't replicate. They added the fat, the sugar, the emulsifiers, and 40 years of advertising convinced everyone their version was normal and the original, the one with oil on top, was somehow the weird artisanal one. The jar in your cabinet isn't the original product. It's a modified industrial version reformulated specifically to make the original look inconvenient. A bag of peanuts, 4 minutes. That's the original. If this gave you something useful, hit like. It costs nothing and it tells the algorithm to show this to the next person paying $6 for a jar of industrial fat and peanut flavoring.